Whaley team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Endzone 2. So for those who want to cross it, I do overviews on this channel. It's where I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam says that you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and broadly I would agree and say that 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, keep it around about 10 minutes and just give you the broad strokes info so you can make up your mind on your own. So this is pretty cool. This is an early access release and it is a sequel to Endzone. I suppose it was subtitled A World Apart, which is one of the few success stories in my estimation that has proven pedigree of going through the early access process and being solid every step of the way, and then going on to have a very good 1.0 release and then lots of DLCs that expanded upon the base game. So, as much as I'm set against early access as a rule, I'm definitely featuring this because these guys earned my trust with the previous game. Now, I've spent my 2 hours with this, and I can report that in many ways it's just Endzone 2. It's just more Endzone. No radical changes. However, they've added a few tweaks, a few changes to sort of UI and production chain interactions, and the expedition system has been sort of upgraded and they've added more minigame to that. So not huge changes, but some cool things added, and honestly exactly what you would want from what would normally be a more derivative sequelized system. Because you could just as easily ask, did we ever need an Endzone 2? And, you know, when you get into that territory, it's not narrative driven. It's not like there's some new story to be told or anything like that. It can be tricky to pull that off without rocking the boat and, you know, without potentially not adding enough. So I think so far this looks very, very promising. So if you're not across it, Endzone is one of the, well, now we've got quite a few to choose from, but it's a colony manager set in post-apocalyptica, which is much more interested in the antagonistic elements being the post-apocalyptic setting, which is, you know, challenging enough on its own. And I personally lean towards these kind of colony builders. Often whenever they put some sort of antagonistic force in the form of an enemy and like combat minigames, they try and blur it into RTS. I think that's a mistake almost every single time. It's hard to think of good examples where it's a true value add. Long and short, if you're going to be a colony manager, just own it. Don't try and straddle the line and be an RTS at the same time. And this, at least the first game, was the king of the castle. There are a couple of other options out there, and sort of noticeably at the time that it came around, and it's a little bit of a history lesson, you might find it interesting. Surviving the Aftermath was kind of the big dog people expected great things from, and it had that sort of paradox, cachet behind it, as well as Surviving Mars, which is still to this day regarded as a pretty fantastic terraforming colony simulator type game. And Surviving the Aftermath is kind of not very good, honestly. And the big problem with that game was that it tried to split it into 2 mini games, if you will, 2 loops, and there was this overworld map management of expeditions and that sort of stuff, and it just really didn't stick the landing, and it was a terrible turn. And this game, at least the first one, cleaned house because it just stuck to the fundamentals and did them really well, and it kind of won. Now the reason for the history lesson is what they've added to this is their own take on the expedition overworld system that Surviving the Aftermath was trying to do. And as much as I vehemently hated that and swore off that sort of mechanic, this game is a perfect example of how to do it properly. So it was a pleasant surprise. At first, when I sort of saw what they were doing, I kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, oh no, you're going down that dangerous path that Surviving the Aftermath basically died on. But no, they do it well here. And this is in the form of expeditions, and it sort of sits a little bit closer to Anno and the way that Anno does island management in recent years, Anno 1800, with this kind of in-between expedition thing going on. So you've got your little party bus, and that's how you start off. The game actually has a very robust, integrated tutorial that will pretty much take you through a playthrough by the look of it. You can move your bus around the open world, and you come to realize after a while that the big, huge map that you inhabit is kind of just islands around. It's difficult to explain, but I'm talking more mechanically than visually. In something like Anno, it's much easier to see because it's literal islands in the ocean, but you have these sort of little outpost settlement areas that are a small little island within the waste, and your car doesn't go into them so much as moves up next to them and makes a depot, and your car navigates the wider world in the so-called ocean, if you will. And it's cool. That's probably the biggest change of the game, and within your little settlement space, and I'm going to keep calling it an island because mechanically that's exactly what this is, it becomes a little bit more of a puzzle game. In the first one, if I recall, you could sort of just spread out and build your base wider and wider. In this, you're given more of a space to work within, which is interesting because ground pollution doesn't seem to be such a big problem here. That was a big mechanic in the first game, though pollution level is still a thing. It's still early. It's early days, so that could change. But it's more like there's different types of soil and ground that will restrict where you can build full stop. And so each of your little settlements becomes a miniature puzzle, which will probably drive people that are really hardcore about anal city block city planning mad, self-included, I guess. But I found myself stepping up to the challenge and enjoying the puzzle-like nature of trying to fit all the different stuff in. And so because of these little mini biomes, much like Anno, you will have multiple settlements that you can run little convoys between with your bus, and you can find other vehicles in the wild as well, so you can build up this whole trade network, but they will have their own local resources specifically. Like my first one didn't have swamplands, but my second one did, and that's required to make herbs in fields and then turn them into sort of like a pharmaceutical. So I ended up with a medical outpost to supply the rest of my wider network. So that's really cool. Big leaf taken from Anno. Arguably a fairly radical change, at least to how settlements work. And now it's more about these little interconnected islands. And then the expedition system, which we brushed over before, is that you can take your bus out to ruins. And honestly, previously the expedition system was pretty lackluster. This is how you do research. So you'll go to a ruin with your little bus, you'll say start expedition, and it gives you a little real-time click around, move your dude around. He's not in any particular danger, but it's kind of a point and click mini adventure that doesn't outstay its welcome. The controls are a little bit fiddly at first, because the feedback on, right click, left click, and whether you're interacting with an environment or taking items out wasn't super clear, but you get used to it. But it will be things like there'll be a safe that needs a lockpick kit to open it up, and that will be a specific expedition type tool and not your normal, lumber or food to supply colonies. So you have these kind of purple hero items in this mini, not RPG, but I don't know, almost Metroidvania light. There'll be doors that you have to knock down, you'll need a fire axe, but you probably don't have a fire axe, so what you'll do is you'll kind of get bottlenecked on that expedition and you'll go drive over to another ruin somewhere else on the world map, and you'll probably find a fire axe there, and so there's this back and forth. I guess it's a little fiddly. It's not so bad, to be honest. It quite grew on me, and I thought, if you're going to do this sort of expedition thing, if you really want to add this layer, this is probably the best way I've seen it done so far. And so by, plugging in generators to open doors, or adding ladders to the bottom of a stairwell, or planks to climb over areas that then allow you to get further into the ruin, it's much more interactive. And then you unlock research points from that, which can then be invested into a research tree. So look, they're the main differences from the first game. And honestly, they seem like welcome changes. As far as early access, it seems to have a lot of content here. I didn't have any performance issues. It's very, very polished. So these guys were already rock solid when they did it in their first game, and they've taken all their learnings and they've brought it forward as well. So this is absolute gold star example of how to do early access, and this should be the norm, and unfortunately this is actually the exception to the rule. So throw your money behind this, support them, or if you're still a little fence city, check out the first game, which, as I check it now at the time of this video and probably for the next couple of weeks by the look of it, it's on ultra deep sale. You can pick it up for like $5 Australian or thereabouts. So yeah, a wonderful series of games. Lovely to see it continue along, chugging along in the background. It's got its fandom, its install base, and their fundamentals, and I'm just really impressed with what I would call a bankable series for both your time and your money. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.